kind of a little bit of a time warp there, thanks to the internet. And how are you this morning, Barrett?
I am doing great, Chris. Yeah, just enjoying this beautiful fall day as we step into the Halloween time of year. I
Yes,
have a couple jack-o'-lanterns out on our front stoop, so yeah, kind of feeling the season.
that's wonderful. Yeah, I've got here at the house we've got our little homage to the spook time of the season, and it's interesting that Halloween occurs in Scorpio time, and you just had your Scorpio time birthday the day before Halloween this year, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
But today is we're recording this on Thursday, and Thursday is the 30th, and the sun is about 6 degrees of Scorpio. The moon is in Aquarius, which is kind of fun. So we have a sun-moon square. People may notice a little bit of edginess in the air when they're interacting with people, and that's always something to note. You don't have to get addicted to it, but it's nice to recognize that there are themes that run through this material world, and often those themes are kind of spotlighted through the use of astrology or some of the other paradigms that we can work with. So you've got all your jack-o'-lantern and holiday treats ready. Do you have a black cat by any chance?
No, I've never had a black cat. I guess the closest I have is I'm wearing a black fleece. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that's actually quite interesting. The whole thing around Halloween is that it is founded on the idea of death and people rising from the grave, and that whole deeper vision of our mortality, the thing we have to fear and ultimately hope to escape, but somehow it overwhelms all of us. And of course, the ego believes that it can never die. It is eternal in its own mind. So, looking at the course, we have the obstacles to peace, which is what is that? That's chapter 19 in A Course in Miracles. And the third obstacle to attaining peace, I love this. This is one of my favorite things from A Course, because it really kind of lays the meat on the slab here, as it were. And it's called the attraction of death. And really a lot of people, that's what Halloween is. We are attracted to death. We like to revel in that belief that we can be harmed, and we like to imagine the gore of those who have transcended this world previously, being able to raise the body back up out of the grave and chase us down and violate us in one way or another. But this particular section, and it's a little lengthy, so bear with me here. To you and your brother, in whose special relationship the Holy Spirit has entered, it is given to release and to be released from the dedication to death. For it was offered you, and you accepted. In other words, God has absolutely no desire to see us die. That's something that we have manufactured for ourselves. Yet you must still learn more about this strange devotion, for it contains the third obstacle: the peace must flow across. No one can die unless he chooses death. What seems to be the fear of death is really its attraction. Guilt, too, is feared and fearful. Yet it could have no hold at all except on those who are attracted to it and seek it out. And so it is with death. Made by the ego, its dark shadow falls across all living things, because the ego is the enemy of life. And Jesus in the Bible and in the Course and all of the references he makes to God, one of his most powerful statements is the very simple one, which is God is life. And so we see this, antagonism that the ego has for God. God's totally oblivious to the ego, so there couldn't be any antagonism, but the ego and its need to control us has created the scariest of all control tools, and that is this image of death. So what are your thoughts? You're right in that season of the year when death comes up and goes, boo.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that really death is nothing more than a thought. To us, it seems so real. It seems so pervasive, but it's just a thought that we have attached to so tightly that we project it out, and we find it everywhere in our world. I liked what you were saying before about, God is life. Life is God. We think that these lives that we live here are life, but Jesus does tell us that, the body's eyes do not see, its ears do not hear. The body does not live or die. So it kind of takes us to the next step, which is, well, what is life? And it's a hard question to answer in a sense. It's easy to say things like, well, God is life, love is life. These terms kind of encapsulate it, but they're challenging because they're abstract. And from our very concrete, specific perspective, we're looking for a concrete, specific answer. And the Course gives us all of these very beautiful images, all of these lovely images, but they're sort of challenging because they point us towards that true experience, but that experience doesn't have the hardness that we're used to in this world. So to me, I think that kind of encapsulates a lot of it. I think it is interesting that we are attracted to death, and you can see it in a lot of aspects of our culture. The Halloween, people like to be scared. Well, horror movies, people will pay $10 to go into theater and have the bejesus scared out of them. And it's interesting because we would say we don't want death. We're afraid of it, like the passage you just read. But the truth is it masks our magnetic pull to it. And I think the other aspect of that ties in here is that since we are, the creator of everything that we experience, from that bigger level, we're the ones that made everything up here that we're seeing and feeling like we're living. The question is, why would we be, experiencing something we don't want? And that's kind of the bind that it appears to show itself to us. Like, well, if I don't want death, then why does it keep showing up in my experience? And the truth is, like you just shared, we're actually attracted to it. We're pulled towards it. And so it keeps showing up for us again and again. But the good news is that we can use that same seemingly hard or challenging circumstance in a new purpose, and that purpose is to help us see its unreality, to help us know that the only truth is the deeper truth of spirit.
Exactly. And one of the things that always stuck in my mind when I was back in my youth and playing around with the Bible was that passage about Lazarus, and where Jesus approaches that idea that people have approached him with, that Lazarus has died, and Jesus says, no, he's just sleeping. And then he goes to the tomb and says, Lazarus, awaken or get up. So I think that's kind of a real vision that has so much power for us once we actually
nothing really is as it seems, and that includes the seeming ultimate thing, which is death. I think that is beautifully expressed in Jesus's end of his life, where he knew that his life wasn't ending, I guess is the better way to put it, even though his body was being taken apart, even though his body was being killed. He knew that the life that he really wasn't even touched. And I think that that's the goal for all of us.
Yeah, that absolutely is the point of it all. And I think that, the Buddha, Siddhartha, when he had his journey through the material world and came to that awakened state, he was not a person who was violated. His transition was not draped in the gore that we see with Jesus. And I think that the story of Jesus does have a tremendous impact simply because of the imagery of the crucifixion and that whole outcome, which is the resurrection. That was, if you want to take the entire story of Jesus and his teachings and his philosophy and everything else, the sum total of the entire dialogue that he exchanged with humanity through whatever means, the Bible or however you want to approach it, Course in Miracles, was that the resurrection was the point of everything that he experienced in this realm, so that it became a clear vision for the rest of us. And he was a pilgrim who opened up a path for humanity as a whole. And yet, unfortunately, frequently the way that he is presented in the more orthodox religious paradigm is that he was sacrificial and suffering, rather than seeing him as being enlightened and triumphant. And I think that's really where the Course kind of separates itself from most spiritual dialogue or religious dialogue.
Yeah, I think that's true. And one of the interesting things about my healing path is I've explored different lifetimes that I've lived before. And one of the most surprising, I guess, to me has been a lifetime where I was one of the soldiers who was actually nailing Jesus to the cross. And what came to me from that experience was very strongly a feeling that there was no suffering, there was no pain being experienced by Jesus as this was happening, and it was extremely shocking in that lifetime to have that experience. In that life, it was really just a job to nail people to crosses, and it was kind of horrible, but you kind of got used to it. And to have this experience of someone who didn't suffer at all, didn't have that experience, really was a breakthrough thing for me. It was just an amazing memory to have resurface for me. So I appreciate that perspective, that it's not really about whether people are suffering or not. It's not about even how it looks. It's about this awakening into the truth of what we are.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, did you have somebody facilitating the process when you had this past life recall, or were you doing this entirely on your own?
This was on my own. Most of the past lives that have come up for me have been kind of part of my self-forgiveness journey, where I've been peeling back the emotions that have come forward, and just things spontaneously come to mind for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know I've had similar experiences, not a large number of them, interestingly enough, because evidently once I go through the big water slide of life in this realm, I arrive back at a point where it's very easy for me to release it, and it's like, oh well, that's over and it's gone. But I do have a couple of very, very strong memories that placed me in Austria, of all places, in the 1700s. And now, when you had your past, I know when I've had my past lives, I knew what I was experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think people have these visions on their own, and they perhaps write them off to fantasy, or disassociate from them and fail to actually get the messages that were contained in them?
Yeah, I think people's experiences fall across a whole range. The most dramatic is like a full, visceral experience, a memory of kind of reliving that time. And the other end of the spectrum is basically, just a very faint inkling of something. Um, so I think depending what the people's experience are, people will oftentimes dismiss them. Um, but to me, past lives, the framework of past lives are useful because they explain these experiences that people often have. Um, One of the things that happened to me is when I traveled to Europe for the first time and I arrived in Germany, I just felt at home. And the simplest explanation for that, for me, knowing what I know about past lives now, is that I was at home. That was my home in another incarnation, and I was simply returning there. People will have those kinds of experiences, and sometimes they might say, "Oh, well, it's just the way I felt. It didn't really mean anything." But to me, the puzzle pieces fit together a little more neatly when we can look at them from the perspective of our multiple incarnations. And ultimately, I think the most value to past lives is in the healing of them. The releasing of the pains or the traumas that we have associated with other lifetimes. And when we set those burdens down, then we actually feel better in our lifetime. So that, to me, is always the goal, ultimately, of looking at this, as opposed to just kind of speculative or like being a tourist in your past kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And that is, in fact, one of the services that you offer now, is that you give people that support and the assistance and give them a guided experience so that you can go back and pull the cover off the hidden realm there of their past lives. What do you pick up around me, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, so there's lots of past lives, and what I find is that I tune into the past life that is ready to help you shift. So that's what I'm kind of being called as you ask that question. The first piece that comes up is a feeling of screaming. This is a lifetime that happened a long time ago, over 1,000 years ago, maybe several thousand. It was a lifetime where you were male, and it was a lifetime where you were homosexual and you were struggling with that. The society that you were in was not accepting of that part of you, wasn't accepting of that in anybody. So it's very common that we have very different experiences in these lifetimes. We play all of the roles and over the course of the many thousands of lifetimes that we have. So the piece that's coming forward the most here for a shift is like accepting not being accepted, because in that lifetime it was kind of your defining struggle. It was a feeling that no matter what you did, who you were was never okay. It had to be hidden, had to be pushed away. I think because in this lifetime you're showing up fully as yourself, these parts of you from the past that don't align with that are ready to kind of be released, and that's why this particular lifetime is showing up. Does that bring up anything for you or make you think?
It actually does. It makes a lot of sense in many ways, because I have never been invested in any social environment that I've been surrounded by. I observe. I've never been committed to national identity, to gender identity, to any of these things. And I think that with my own personal experience, when the Course came along, it really liberated me in one sense that the whole paradigm of commitment and relationship has to be looked at, because we do try to make relationships special. We try to make them personal, and ultimately we need to get use out of them. We make them useful for our own needs, and that that creates the victim situation within relationships. And so in this particular lifetime, I think my strongest paradigm, I guess you could say, for identity was Native American. And so here I am in white America, and appearing to be very white American, and yet my consciousness, my mindset, my attitudes, my belief systems were all conditioned by my grandfather, who was full-blood. And this was a man who was beaten by people in the school that he attended whenever he would use his native language. You know, I mean, you go back to the 1890s and see how the whites treated both the blacks and the Native Americans, and I imagine the Spaniards, the Spanish, Mexicans as well. They were ruthless and brutal. And so with that as kind of a core identity, the Native American identity, it was as polarized as being homosexual, or having an arm growing out of the top of your head, or being Chinese, or whatever. There's always this underlying identity associated with skin color, height, weight, sex, all of these different things. And really, at the core of A Course in Miracles, we have that realization that all of those are masks that we wear. And so now we're all of a sudden back where? We're back at Halloween, wearing our mask, going from door to door, asking for candy, And unfortunately, occasionally some of us land on a doorstep where the voice comes from behind the door, "Hey, you want some candy?" So, but that really is, a big part of the human experience that we have in this realm, as we are cultured into an identity, and then we use that identity to attack people who have a different identity, and it gets ugly real fast.
Yeah. And again, I think the parallel between that lifetime, that past lifetime, and this current one for you too is the willingness to start to step out of the identity of the small s self, so that you can step into the capital S self of the Holy Spirit, of that true identity that you're talking about. And I really like that you brought up the masks of Halloween, because that was on my mind when we were talking about Halloween too, and all the masks that we wear. And Jesus does talk about our masks as well in the text. And I'm going to read just a little bit out of chapter 31 in the section 5, which is self-concept versus self. Here he's talking about the face of innocence, which is really the heart of the masks that we wear. And it's the mask of, we're the good guy that covers over the deep, dark emotions that are under the surface in all of us. So, yeah. All right, where am I going to start? It is this face that smiles and charms, and even seems to love. It searches for companions, and it looks at times with pity on the suffering, and sometimes offers solace. It believes that it is good within an evil world. This aspect can grow angry, for the world is wicked and unable to provide the love and shelter innocence deserves. And so this face is often wet with tears at the injustices the world accords to those who would be generous and good. So this is all of our mask. This is the I'm not the victim. I'm not the victimizer. I'm the victim. And I'm going to just read another little section that kind of ties this up a little bit more. The face of innocence, the concept of the self so proudly wears, can tolerate attack in self-defense. For is it not a well-known fact the world deals harshly with defenseless innocence? No one who makes a picture of himself omits this face, for he has need of it. The other side he does not want to see. Yet it is here the learning of the world has set its sights, for it is here the world's quote-unquote reality is set, to see to it the idol lasts. So he goes on to talk about the very dark, parts of ourselves, which were kind of touched on by this attraction to death. The part of us that has this bloodlust, the part of us that has this enjoyment out of fear or pain. This doesn't really make sense in a rational way, but the deepest part of our mind is not really rational. And it's why throughout the Course Jesus kind of gently tells us how insane we are. Because we're identifying with a thought system that glorifies death. It holds it above life. And this Halloween season is sort of a season that embodies that and holds death up as an idol. And the question that we have then is, what do we value? What is it that we want? And our answer will determine our experience. And part of what we do as we study a course is we get more and more honest. We get more and more truthful about our motivations and how we're feeling. And I think what happens is we acknowledge this part of us that does like death, it is attracted to that. That we are one of the people that wants to kind of rubberneck when we go by the accident that happened on the side of the highway. What are we going to see? And when we can acknowledge that, then we can start to make a new choice. It's not until we really fully own that part of ourselves that we can actually decide if it's what we want to keep investing our energy into. So, any thoughts on that, Chris?
Oh, I think it's very lucid and very to the point, and that really is the whole human experience. Unfortunately, this entire universe that we have created, this bubble of darkness in the world of light, runs as a counterpoint to everything that the Course illuminates for us, which is that we are in fact eternal, we are in fact perfect. And in this realm, we're not surrounded by light, we're surrounded by a black universe with an occasional star scattered across it. But, one of the things that happens with the Course is after you start to get into it, you start to contemplate the idea, what if this is a negative of the true universe? The true universe is all light, so that not even the slightest bit of darkness is discernible anywhere. And I think a lot of people get into a defensive space around that and say, oh yeah, but you have to have the darkness in order to enjoy the light. Well, perhaps in your mind, but in reality I think the darkness is something that we have to recognize is the gateway into the realm of truth. So we do penetrate the darkness to get back to the light and to be able to live in the light in an empowered and eternal fashion.
Yeah, I think that's true. We can't deny our attachment to this thought system. And the more we deny it, the more we actually give it power. it's by acknowledging it and by bringing it forward that we can begin to dissolve it and experience that joy, that happiness that underlies everything that shifts and changes.
Exactly. Well, this has been a great adventure, episode 2 of our ongoing series, and Barrett's paradigm that he works with most immediately right now is looking at past lives, and most of you people know me from my astrology, so next week I'm going to take a look at Barrett's chart, and we'll loop that into the dialogue. So for those of you who are wondering what's Barrett all about, I'll have the deepest, darkest secrets that we will throw out on the table here.
All right. Sounds like gory fun.
Yes, I think so. I think this is Fright Fest in a grand scale. You know, I mean, what could great America offer us that we can't offer ourselves within our imaginations?
All right. Well, we'll have this week be the click clack up the rollerblade. Up the roller coaster, and then next week we'll go over the edge and see where the fun takes us.
Yes, we'll definitely take the plunge. Well, it was great chatting with you, Barrett, and be looking forward to next Thursday for us, and then it gets posted on Friday. So every Friday, you viewers, keep an eye out for each new edition of The Miracle Within.
All right. Thanks so much, Chris. This was great, and I'll see you next week.
Sounds perfect. Take care, Barrett.
All right. Bye, Chris.
Bye.